All right, well, I guess we'll get started. Thanks everyone for coming in today. Thanks for coming out during a crazy time. But I do want to talk about something that's been on the forefront of my mind, no pun intended, in our industry that needs more attention is mental health and self-care. Because really, when you look at it, the cybersecurity professionals spend most of their days focused on the health and well-being of their environments and their care. However, the cost of reducing the risk and keeping our networks often comes at the price of our professionals' mental health, and it's just a reality. So many information security professionals suffer from burnout, suffer from anxiety, depression, and really we often see people turn to really unhealthy coping mechanisms, which further just really exacerbates a lot of these underlying problems. So my goal with this talk, now I've been giving it for almost 18 months now, is really kind of alleviate some of the stigma around mental health and stress the importance of open and frank dialogues about this serious issue kind of impacting the community. So I'll share my journey. We kind of try to reverse engineer some of the stigma around mental health in our business and kind of look at ways that we can not really hack mental health in more productive ways. I will say there are some things that are going to be uncomfortable subjects and what we call triggers in kind of mental health, not that I'm a mental health professional, but triggers are those things that kind of put us mildly, kind of haunt us. They sit in your back and your mind, and when discussed can make you feel like you're experiencing past trauma, so it triggers some level of PSD sometimes. You don't even know why it's happening. And I was listening to something earlier this year, it was a Tim Ferriss podcast, and he was talking about early childhood trauma, and I found myself really upset by it, like physically not feeling well, and I didn't know why, but those were these triggers, and I would just turn it off. It was something that was just, okay, this is triggering something. So if there's anything I'm talking about that makes you feel uncomfortable, you do not have to sit through it. Just unplug, walk away. That's completely fine. Don't feel bad. I understand. You do not have to tough any of this stuff out. The standard disclaimer is I'm not a doctor, nor do I play on TV. So the content of this presentation is meant for information purposes only, not a substitute for medical advice. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information, is only for general information purposes only. I, Splunk, CornCon, make no representation, assume no responsibility for the accuracy of the information contained or available in this presentation. So this is not medical advice. Never disregard professional medical opinions, and if you need help, get help. There you go, Greg, you witnessed it. Sign liability waivers. And when we talk about some of these topics, it's important to understand the definitions and context. So mental health from Health and Human Services includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make our choices. So many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors such as genetics and brain chemistry, life experiences such as past trauma or abuse, and or family history of past mental health issues. So that's kind of the Health and Human Services version of mental health. Self-care is any activity that we do deliberately. So it's these things that you really make an effort to in order to take care of your emotional, mental, and physical health. They're not passive action, but things that you really kind of, again, that are self-initiated that you go through, and it can be self-control. And neurodiversity is a relatively new topic, and it's something that I deal with at work a lot because I'm on the employee resource group for neurodiversity, and this encompasses a lot of different areas. So the definition that I kind of pulled from multiple sources that I've been using is neurodiversity is the idea that neurological differences like autism, ADHD, mood, and other functions that have historically been viewed with this very negative perception are the result, quite frankly, of some normal variations in the human genome. It's part of evolution as we change and grow as a species. So this really represents a new and fundamentally different way of looking at conditions that were traditionally pathologized. And it's a viewpoint that's not universally accepted, but is getting more and more support through science. So that's good. And it's this idea that neurodiversity and neurodiversity advocates point out that neurodivergent people often have exceptional abilities alongside what society has traditionally viewed as problematic or disabilities. So we try to look at it and know that when you have brain functions, they're not disabilities, they're just differences. It's almost like different operating systems. Every computer might be a little different. How you interact with those operating systems might be different. One's not necessarily better or worse than the others, whatever works. But again, going into what we're going to talk about today, I'm not going to dive too deep into the university topic. It's a bit of a fire hose just about itself. So I do heavily recommend people look at it within their workplaces and what they can do to support neurodivergent individuals. I've been talking about cybersecurity and IT for 30 years in front of audiences, and right now I've really changed my focus to diversity causes, mental health, and other issues. And it's interesting because I can tell some of those crazy APT stories of chasing people out of networks from state-sponsored threat actors, and people are like, oh, that's cool. When I give this talk, generally people send me a flood of messages afterwards saying, thank you for talking about this. This is something we're not talking about enough. So once I started doing that, I realized that this was something I really need to dig further into and continue to speak about, because I'm talking about these other areas of cybersecurity and fixing enterprise networks for so long. I might as well try to fix the human element as well. When you look at people, process, technology, the people part really should be the most important. And going back and really thinking about how long I've been doing some level of incident response or crisis management, and I really think that's where I stand out professionally, is being able to deal with high stress environments. And this is a plaque I got in 1986 where a friend of mine, we were at a ski trip, we were night skiing back in New York. He falls, gets hurt, is crying. I went and got help. I got him situated, and they gave me an award for clear thinking in a crisis situation. And it really sort of relates to everything that I've been doing my whole life, is I really think of myself as the wolf in certain ways from Pulp Fiction, where I can go into crisis situations. You need to get rid of a dead body, just call me. But you have to do what I say and do it with focus. Because I don't tend to get shaken in these environments. Rushing over here, not worrying that if I had the power I just knew it, I'll figure it out. My mind just goes into that zone. But I have really bad anxiety, crippling anxiety at times, and it doesn't show. And so that's the monster in the closet, which has been something I've been dealing with for so long. So even though I can do all these things in an almost seamless kind of way, underlying it's a fight every day. It's something I have to deal with, and I'll talk a little bit in my journey about it, but it is something that is part of who I am. I can't change, and I just have to accept and manage. Even though I can do these things really well, this is something that's part of my vulnerability management scheme. And the reality is, as I started talking about it more and more, I started seeing more of the research that supported the fact that I'm not alone in this, and that a lot of folks feel the pressure of these environments, and when not managed properly, can really have some long-term effects. And Andrea Lamarga said it in an interview a couple of years ago, there's never a downtime, it's non-stop, and every day is about. And that's cybersecurity. It's on, and you're worried about things that are going to happen every day. Quite frankly, you have to be right seamlessly all the time, and attackers get to be right once or twice. They exploit a couple of vulnerabilities, and they get in, and we're trying to manage massive environments with visibility. It's stressful. So it's really surprised that depression, burnout, and even suicide are becoming more common with cybersecurity professionals. And really, when you look at it from the World Health Organization, they say depression is the leading cause of disability in the world, followed by heart disease. So it's a serious issue. And then people with mental health conditions are in the highest risk group for suicide. Most of my days focused dealing with almost coaching and mentoring CISOs and how to manage their environment, be more business focused. And I started looking at some of the numbers specifically for that cohort of folks that I deal with on a daily basis of CISOs. So there was a study done in 2019, and this is just for CISOs, global CISOs, but I think the numbers can really extrapolate well. It said, about 91% of the CISOs surveyed said their levels of stress, they were suffering from moderate to high. 68% rarely disconnected from their work role. 88% working more than 40 hours per week, with 27% working 60 hours per week or more. 89% of US-based CISOs have never had a 2-week vacation in their role. That's insane. And most feel that their teams are unappreciated by senior leadership, and almost all feel that a breach was inevitable, but their CEOs in these organizations, when polled in surveys, only about 50 to 60% felt that a breach was inevitable. So there's a huge disparity, I should say, in the way that organizational leaders look at things as far as impact of business from a cyber event versus what the CISOs have to deal with on a daily basis. But all these CISOs felt they would either be written up or could potentially lose their job if there was a breach. So it's no surprise really that there's this high turnover in these roles. You know, we normally see individuals that are in their roles for about 18 months. They start maybe affecting change. By that point, they're burned out, done with senior leadership, move on. Another CISO comes in. They take about 6 to 8 months to come up to speed. And by the time they get momentum really going, they leave. So it's this vicious cycle. And so when we talk from tone from the top about governance and leadership, my view is that mental health has to be part of this as well. We have to kind of govern this down and really support it at really the board level. How we're not burning out senior leadership and cybersecurity goals because we're not really getting the changes that we want to see. And so it's becoming this kind of vicious cycle. And with people not having the tools for stress management, it really exacerbates a lot of underlying issues. And some of the tools that we'll talk about later, but that we've done traditionally, it's been kind of go-to coping mechanisms. It's been, if you go to, hacker summer camp, it's been alcohol, drugs, strip clubs. I mean, it's just this party scene to blow off steam. That's not for everybody. And Jamie Tomasello said it a couple years ago that speaking of Black Hat 2018, she really talked about the stigma of being a recovering alcoholic in this community. That was really hard. And I have people that I know at work that are like, I'm tired of every time we go to a conference, it has to be some alcohol focus came out with something else. So I've been trying to change that with some of the things I've been doing with different conferences. At this year at DEF CON, we did a mental health village. We did it a couple weeks ago at Blue Team Con, done it at Wellness Hacker Fest. But then we provide these other safe spaces. So as a community, we need to do more of these types of things to support our members in our community with other factors and other things to develop the stress management techniques. Because we've really done a piss poor job. And I'm obviously not against going out and having fun, but I think it needs to have some balance. And that's one of the things I want to see driven in our community. And it should not be our only answer. And again, I've been really bad about that, and I'm trying to do better, and I hope everybody else will too. Because it's not okay just to say kind of fuck it, blow off steam, and just go. We don't do enough layered security in our mental health as much as we do in our environments. It's not like saying, hey, we're just going to throw an AP and we'll be good. And it's the same thing, but we're just like, let's go to a bar, have a couple drinks. We got to do more to really kind of protect our neural networks as well, and really kind of maintain this layer of mental health. Because it's getting worse. This last year, I think we all know, it's been full of suck. Adding in Corona has just been a thing that has really exacerbated a lot of people. It's been a hard year. People who have lost loved ones, it's disrupted work and school routines. I'm used to doing this on the road all the time, and this is only like my third in-person speaking event in almost 2 years. I'm not used to not being in front of people, and it's really thrown me off my game. And I'm not looking for pity, but to say, we're not alone in this if this is the way you feel. And it's multiple times today that I'm talking to friends and family that are really starting to struggle with this. It's this long-term effect, this languishing, as they call it, with COVID right now. It's this one quote I saw that really describes it somewhat accurately. It's this unrelenting horizonless of the COVID world. Like, when is this going to end? It just feels like it's never going to end. Now with the Delta variant. So again, we have to do things that are better at managing this. And again, for me, I feel helpless at times because there's people that I want to help and I can't because of this environment. So it sucks for me not to be able to swoop in like the wolf from Pulp Fiction and just fix everything. There's just things I cannot do right now. And so we're all starting to feel that. And it's getting worse. One of the long tail effects of again, this languishing, this burnout, these mental health is suicide. I live in Colorado, and we're seeing a spike in it. Both, just about every age cohort you can imagine, there is an increase in suicide. And they're on the rise. And it's great when people feel helpless. But again, one of my favorite bands of all time is H2O. They're a New York City hardcore band. There's one of their songs is "Helpless, Not Hopeless," and I try to think about that all the time. It's like, okay, we feel that we can't get through this, but we can. We have to work together because this is such a great quote from James Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So we have to kind of go at these issues And we have to talk about mental health. And it cannot be avoided as a topic in cybersecurity any longer. And so I really try to pledge this community to continue to talk about it, raise awareness, and remove the stigma. I definitely do not have all the answers, and I won't pretend to, but I'm not going to be shy about talking about these issues any longer. Because as hackers, we can figure this out. We can put our minds to every problem, there's a solution together. So obviously, Corona aside, which is the elephant in the room, Resiliency exacerbated a lot of these underlying issues. And I really need to start doing some root cause analysis for the profession itself. You know, how did we get here? How are we at the point where people are burning out and feeling unsupported mentally? And if you really think about what cybersecurity is, it's still a relatively new industry. You know, really, the way I look at our teenage years is this Frankenstein monster that has just been lumped together from IT, consulting, operations, legal, compliance, privacy. So we have a bit of an identity crisis right now, and it's made it harder to really understand what works and what doesn't. So there's a lot of good in our business practices, but there's also a lot of negatives. And so I've seen one of the things we have to change is removing some of this pressure and really staffing things better. So it's not this idea of, well, you have to work longer, you have to tough it out, you know, you have this high utilization rates, you just have to go, and aggression is winning. And I think I've done really well in that environment, but it's definitely not for everybody. It's probably hurt a lot in the industry. So it's even done things in my own behavior that's caused problems, I think, in the industry because I've supported a little bit. Because this mental construct of just pressure and whatnot doesn't work for everyone. And some of the things I started looking at as I started hiring a younger crowd of folks over the past 10 years, they were like, we don't want to do that. Like, we've seen that affect our parents. We've seen that hurt in my family. I don't want to work 80 hours a week. I want to work 40 hours a week when I have my weekends off. I want to be able to turn off and then want a better work-life balance. So then as me as a leader, I felt, okay, how do we do that? That's never been the way. And as I started looking at it, there was ways to do that. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it can be done. We can do this work-life balance. And I know it sucks because we feel that, okay, well, you know, lives can't literally be on the line with a lot of what we do. And it's different than when we train in something that is a pure IT. You know, with a lot of things in IT, you can blame a bad patch, server goes down, okay. But nobody really gets fired for that. They don't feel like they're going to be fired for that necessarily. You can roll it back. But when you have a breach, it's usually involved at some part of that people process technology, that people part, somebody missed something. And so they're feeling that stress. They're feeling that weight. And we don't teach people how to cope with that level of stress. And we call it organizational harm. And if you're in certain industries, if you're in OT or medical, that could be somebody's life. And we don't really provide enough foundation as an industry to help people cope with that level of stress. And that's one of the things I think we all have to kind of work on changing, because it's not fair, healthy, or scalable. So I'll talk a little bit about my journey in general. And I was born in 1976, so I'm 30 years old. And but you know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and for me it was this. It was, you know, punk and hardcore music, skateboarding, comic books, all the things that are cool now that actually get a lot of attention, or got my ass kicked in high school for. Yeah, so it was really tough. I always felt like the odd man out. You know, socially, organizationally in school, I just didn't fit in. I got through, and I graduated high school, but I never really felt like I belonged there. And they were always like, "You're smart, but you know this is not the right organization for you." So I kind of got through, but it sucked, and I really didn't have good, I would say, coping mechanisms. My parents, my sisters, all really kind of, you know, type A personalities. So by the time I'm getting towards my years of getting to college, it was kind of, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I just felt the pressure that's getting out of high school. I'm prepared to meet the real world, and you know, I started with some friends, and some friends were like, oh, you know, obviously what happens in teenage years, you sneak beers, get weed, whatever it is. And I'd smoked some weed, and I had never done that, and it was fun. The second time, massive panic attack. And what turns out is that in my brain chemistry, there's just imbalances I didn't know about. And so a lot of this underlying stress and anxiety I was feeling really manifested itself really horribly by a chemical that threw something off. Because it was basically the difference between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is prepares the body for that fight or flight moment. The parasympathetic nervous system inhibits the body from overworking and restores that balance. Mine goes off, and mine was just in like full out, just rush mode. I felt like I was going to die. I didn't know what was going on. This went on for days, in and out of the hospital. My parents were taking notes. I was like, my heart was racing. Like, there's nothing wrong. Your blood tests are coming right. Finally, it took about 3 or 4 doctors to go, you know, you're having like massive panic attacks and anxiety. I was like, what is that? And we didn't know. It wasn't something that was readily talked about in the early 90s. And he said, yeah, go downstairs to the psychiatrist downstairs and he'll get you sorted out. And we did. And I got help that I needed. But it was that first bout of anxiety in the early 90s that I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know it was this underlying medical condition. So it became something that I kind of learned to deal with, get out of high school. And I'm like, okay, now what am I doing? Well, I'm really into computers and technology, and people are like, well, we live in IBM country, we're working with build mainframes. I'm like, can I not do that? Is there anything other than that? Because there was these things, computers, this internet, this stuff might have caught on, but you know, this was growing even in the 90s. I'm like, why am I not focusing there? Well, that's where most people are spending their time in technology and business in their personal lives, but there wasn't a program for it. So I had to go out and start a business doing a lot of kind of break fix stuff. It was a managed service provider. And so that worked really well. I had this huge market share of, you know, we'll call it totally addressable market, but it was all these people that had home computers and business computers that were not getting the help. And I had this business called Computer House Calls. I was able to market it, brand it, got a bunch of press and PR, and it took off. And I was doing really well. And eventually I started getting some more enterprise clients. And eventually I had Merrill Lynch and all these big banks, and I was doing work for them and going into convention centers like this. Because again, I've been traveling since before when my parents had their own consulting business, but I was traveling all over the world, setting up networks, and I was just going, and I had another kind of burnout trigger event in the late 90s that really was my first bout of burnout that brought back a lot of those parasympathetic sympathetic imbalances, and I was just totally crushed. I was unable to do anything. The anxiety and depression just came in, and I couldn't work. I mean, I was literally just, because I was just going 15, 16 hours a day, traveling and just going, and it was just, I never gave myself any downtime, so I burned out hard and had to step back from everything for about 2 months, kind of really get myself reoriented. And it was a really tough period that I got out of it. While it was nothing that I triggered it, because I was thinking, well, in the 90s, like, okay, like I smoked weed, and what did this? And it was like, that just worked. That there has to be something else. And what else could? And I wasn't really understanding that there was these underlying issues. But I kind of get through it, and I go on and I manage it. And then through the early 2000s, I met my ex-wife at the time, and we got married in 2008. We had a kid, and then 2012 comes around, and now I have a kid, and I'm having to move out running my own businesses. So at this time, I had a company called Digital Forensic Group in New York City doing cybersecurity litigation work. And I had to kind of give that up and give away some of my entrepreneurial stuff to go in-house to a company because they had healthcare. You know, it was a big thing. It was a big life choice for me to have to support my family, and it was a bit of an identity crisis because me as this entrepreneur, somebody who's always been against the system, having to go into Duff & Phelps, which is an institutional banking consulting firm, and put on a suit every day and do that. It was just an odd cultural fit for me. You know, it didn't feel right, but I had to get through it. It was kind of going through the motions, and that was really what set into like this kind of lethargic, low-level depression that went on for years that I really didn't understand why I was so unhappy, because I really didn't work through these issues, really understand it. I just felt I had to do it. And that went on for, I'd say, until about 2015, 16, where I was just like, I can't like really do this anymore. I was working at a company where culturally it was a bad fit, but I was like, I'm going to start making some changes with the leadership that I had there. And even in my home life where I was struggling with some things, my ex-wife, and I was like, I had to make a change. And then I did. I actually, well, some of it, when you find happens in life, is not always self-initiated. I basically had the manager I was working with, who was my mentor, came over from Duff & Phelps to this other company. They fired him, like, unceremoniously in front of, like, us, my team, where we had about 15 people. And so, Doug, you're the new leader of this group. You don't have to stay. We're going to give you a bonus, but if you decide not safe to leave right now too. And I was like, thanks. Okay. So it was this kind of Sophie's choice that I had to deal with. But I went in and took things over, and I had, okay, now people that are directly reporting to me, I have a big P&L I have developed, and I really kind of, something just clicked, that pressure that turned on, where I was able to really dig into things and get things going. I started practicing meditation, doing all those other things, and self-care, and really focusing on organizational management and caring for the people in my care. And things got better. Things got better at home, things got better at work, and I went through this kind of rebound. I was feeling alive again because I was now kind of in control of my own destiny at this company. They were giving me a lot of free reign to do things, and I was back to being my entrepreneurial self, working with the company. So it was very entrepreneurial. And this went on great, but then I felt, okay, living in New York City with a kid, a dog, I'm traveling all the time. The ex-wife's having to take the kid in and out, the building all day. It's one of those things that was, actually it's great until you have to live there because it's a stressful environment. If I'm focused on self-care in a better environment, where do we go? And I literally did risk management. I pulled out a map of the United States, looked at everywhere that had fault lines, potential nuclear strikes. I looked at everything from a risk management perspective as if I was putting in a data center. I said, wow, Colorado keeps coming up as a great place to live, great quality of life, schools. I can lobby my income, so I was like, I'm going to go there. And we kind of we were wagons, trains west, and we made this decision to move from Brooklyn to Colorado. 2 weeks before we're about to move, we're packing up everything, and they're showing our apartment in Brooklyn. And we're just basically going to try to find a place to go have brunch. And all I see is coming out is a car, just out of nowhere. We were going through an intersection, and some lady on her phone wasn't paying attention, blew through the red light, hit us, just missed my side of the car, spun us around 2 times, went up on the curb. Everybody's screaming, daughter's crying, freaked out. I get out, make sure everything's okay. And it was an incredibly just crazy event that was just traumatic. But at the time I didn't feel anything, I was just all adrenaline, but the next day when I woke up, I couldn't move. And my entire right-hand side of my body was just in excruciating pain. What had happened was, during this period, I blew out 2 discs in my back, and I didn't even know at the time because it was just getting the adrenaline was going. But the discs were bulging so bad that they were pressing on a nerve that I couldn't lay down, I couldn't sit down, and it was just non-stop pain 24 hours a day physically. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, how the hell am I going to move? Like, I got to help my family move across the country, and I can barely move my body. And I didn't, making this big leap of faith with the company to move an office out to Colorado, and I can't show them that I'm having this weakness now. So I just try to bury it, get through it. And it was a really upsetting time to sit there and try to orient this idea of moving this entire family west to get to a safer place. I can't do anything. I felt completely debilitated. But we get out to Colorado, and I'm trying to get through this. I'm getting some amazing PT and other medical care because it's really in rural Colorado. You have doctors that deal with Olympiads and all the professional athletes. So I was getting world-class care, which was great because the pain was just going on. We're just trying to figure out if there's going to be surgery. I'm like, no, we'll get through it. And then about a month into it, I had got a phone call from the company. They said, hey, just want you to hop on a call real quick. Sure. Like, we're totally downsizing your entire division. And you and everybody within the organization are now gone, effective immediately. And I'm watching them remote into my computer and just turning it off as I'm talking to them. And it was just, they're like, have a nice day. I'm like, well, was there a severance package? And I'm like, not saying like you know who I am, but at an executive level, like, oh, you'll be fine, you get a job tomorrow. I'm like, not in my role. That's like, as a security, that takes 6 to 8 months. Like, I don't need to make a lot of choices like that. It's not, I'm just going to go hop into an entry-level job. And this is my life and career. But like, not a problem. To them, it was like, it's a business decision. You're just a line on a spreadsheet. And it was just this total punch in the gut to say, like, I'm here, I'm like, physically in pain, you're cutting off my health care, you're cutting off my source of income, I just spent everything to get out here. A little heads up would have been nice, and they're just like, but you're just, and it's just that impersonal feeling of being a line on a balance sheet. And so I was like, okay, again, I'll just fight through it. I'll just keep going. I won't really kind of process this right now. I'll get through it. And I started doing some stuff in the local community out there, reached out to the CISO community I knew, so folks in ISSA, ISACA, Cybersecurity, and they're like, well, yeah, get involved in B-Sides, Denver, which I spoke at and organized yesterday, but 4 years ago, I was like, all right, I'm gonna jump into this. And I'm not physically or mentally really doing well at this point, but I'm just gonna ignore that. And I remember moving a box of, there's a bunch of routers and power cables I was gonna bring down to Denver, and I moved and I just re-injured my back really bad this time. So whatever like little steps I had made were just totally washed away, and the pain was even worse than it was before. And that's like really when it all hit. Everything kind of collapsed around me at that point. I just remember specifically lying on the floor in so much pain, and just really the weight of the world that was closing around me. The feeling of the car accident, the loss of the job, the move, everything just started impacting me. And when you look at this scale, the Holmes rating scale really kind of measures these levels of stress in your life. And when you compound these levels of risk, you try to avoid getting above 100, 150 scores. So it's like a CVSS score of 3 and below. You want to maintain low-level stuff. Unfortunately, I got up to over 400 when I really got this up. And that's bad. Like if the high numbers are bad. Over 3, and look at 300 points or more is an 80% chance of a health breakdown. I was well over that, and I was just unable to function. Everything that I've ever felt before came as far as anxiety, depression, and my mental pain was unbelievably high. So again, one being the feeling of emotional elation, you deal with stress, and again, stress is not bad, it's something you need in your life, in your human environment, it helps do a lot of things, but it's a balance. And if you start looking at some of these things that were more on the severe scale, I was easily at a 10 in this, if not more. Again, the worst mental and emotional distress possible, coupled by physical pain that's neurological, the inability to take care of my family, and basically this sense of worth being taken away. Again, I was just a number on a balance sheet that got taken out, and I can't take care of my family, I'm in physical pain, and the depression just started setting in. It was inevitable. Everything that I was fighting against to not manage and not deal with came crashing in. And so this is so we moved in March, April 15th, 17th timeframes, right after Easter is when they ripped us off. Early days when I injured my back. And by June, I was just basically functionless. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't stay awake. Like everything was just this weird kind of moment of just feeling so detached from reality and worthless. And Father's Day is coming up, and it's mid-June, and I'm just feeling like I'm the worst version of a father ever. Like I couldn't do anything. Here I am trying to take care of my family, and I'm useless. Maybe I'm not worth to be here. And really the depression and suicide thoughts started coming in. It's just maybe that's the only way to end this pain. And for anybody that's been there, it's a dark pain, and it's a really dark thing to have to feel and live with, and feel that there's nothing left worth living for, and that you're only alive for maybe your family. And William Styron wrote this in his 1990 memoir about depression. I'm usually not a slides and put a lot of text on, but I think this is one of those important ones to kind of read and hear at the same time, because it really sets. He says it so eloquently, like how you feel at that time. He says, the gray drizzle of horror induced by depression takes on the quality of physical pain, but it's not an immediately identifiable pain like that of a broken limb. It might be more accurate to say that despair, owing to some evil trick played upon the sick brain by the inhabiting psyche, come to resemble the diabolical discomfort of being imprisoned in a fiercely overheated room. And because no breeze stirs this cauldron, because when there's no escape from this smothering confinement, it's entirely natural that the victim begins to think ceaselessly of oblivion. It's, there's nothing really more I can say after that. It was just a dark pit of despair. And I have no health care. I can't even get mental health support because we're so poorly designed in this country when it comes to healthcare about tying it to a job, which I now don't have. Social services, I couldn't get help with. I was on some government aid at that point, and basically government food stamps. I couldn't get health care. I was on unemployment. Everything just felt like I just couldn't survive. But I luckily found, after calling around, somebody that was willing to see me right away. He's like, oh yeah, I deal with high stress professionals all the time, that you're not alone in this. You've seen them treated a lot of people in your position. So one, you're not alone. Two, there's a way out, but you need to kind of follow the directions. And he became that person. He was like, shut up, stop arguing with me and stuff. And these are the steps you're going to take. Through medication and other types of cognitive behavior that got me back on track. And within a couple months, so from June until about August, I really made a full recovery. And it was not easy. It was a hard road, and it took its toll on my marriage, it's my daughter, financially. I just got out of that. But I was able to get into a new organization, started incident response practice, and grow that from 0 people to 10 people again, and be back on my feet within a couple of months, which felt good. And it's able to get into this new product, this new life, and things are going great. But what I learned out of all this is this level of resiliency, is that you can get through this and you have to plan for this, because this year has been a tough year for many ways. And if I go back to that stress scale, this year, just this summer alone, my dog, we had to put our dog down, so he died. 2 days later, my car was stolen in my driveway. So it was pretty much John Wick at that point. If there was a Russian nightclub, I was going to go fuck the club. And I'm a little out of shape right now. I know I got all black on. But no, and then, get a divorce. So it's just like all these things compressed within a couple of weeks. People are like, are you okay? I'm like, actually I am, because I learned a lot of things from resilience about this. And that's been my kind of focus on organizational resilience, but it reflected easily, or not easily, but to a certain way, into my mental health. It's like, how am I going to be resilient about these things? Because things are going to happen, and I need to learn how to cope and deal with them. And I really built a lot of tools over the last 4 years to do that. So this summer was, it sucked, but I learned how to kind of be in the moment with it and not hide from it and let it build up to the point where the system crashed. And the reality is that what I learned out of all this is that mental illness is an illness, and we really need to move past the stigma and shame that people feel about the illness and their differences. Because what happens is it forces people to self-medicate, it forces people not to deal with these issues, and they don't seek professional treatment. And I probably should have gotten treatment when all this stuff was going on much earlier, before things got that bad. But the stigma of doing it, me being a type A personality, was, no, I just got to tough it out. And it's stupid. I mean, we wouldn't tell somebody that's diabetic to suck it up, right? I mean, we wouldn't tell them just to smile. We wouldn't use language like, hey, you're just being an insulin baby about this, shut up. We don't have this parity of mental and physical health that we really need to have. So we need to look at how people feel mentally and physically as the same aspects. So we need to put this together. And this goes back to one of the things I was talking about earlier, where people say, well, is this, you've been through all this, so you're just being overly sensitive, and now it's being altruistic. And I said, well, hold on a second. I almost got knocked out of the economy, and now I'm back doing a lot of things and making huge organizational changes for companies across the world. And I'm just one person, but my one to many impact almost got wiped out. So if we don't treat each one of these issues and each one of these people right, we're going to lose a lot of good people that could affect change on a larger scale. And one of the things I started looking at is when I built out that practice in 2016, I was really focused on the health of my professionals. Now, I'm starting a new office in Denver with very high utilization targets, and I took in a bunch of things and said, okay, let's really look at this more realistically. How can I make sure these people are resilient and maintain their ability to be high output performers in this? And what I was able to do is really able to build a team that balanced their time up, they looked out for each other, and what we ended up with were people that were happier and healthier. They were staying in the game longer, and I ended up with happier customers, higher top line revenues, higher profit margins, We didn't have to redo work constantly. Our customer satisfaction was higher. My retention rate was higher. Every employee survey was higher. So when I realized it's not this zero-sum game, we don't have to treat mental health as this thing we don't want to deal with in the business, because if we do, it's going to cost us money. If you don't deal with it, it's going to cost you far more. So we have to look at things like mental health as something that needs to be baked into the way that we do business. And again, this reality is that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I can't sit there and let people go through this and not deal with it. So that's some of the things that I'm trying to work on. And when we look at what are some of the coping skills now within the mental health community, there's specific things when we talk about mental health treatment outside of self-care, which I'll talk about in a second. There's things that I use that I'm not afraid to talk about. There's medications like Lexapro. I got my mother recently on an SSRI because she was having issues, and I said, 83 years old, you're going through life changes, you're not coping well. Talk to somebody who gets some medication. So there's different types of therapy that work for everybody. For me, what worked was acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, and it's this evolution of cognitive behavior therapy that worked really well for me, because really what I learned out of that, and why it's been able to orient me to this summer of dealing with things, is you really stop avoiding and denying with your inner emotions. And this idea of acceptance, that I have these issues, they can't be fixed, nor should I try to fix them, because that was the struggle. I was constantly struggling every day to fix my mental health issues instead of just managing them. And once I learned how to manage it, it was much easier. I stopped fighting it constantly. And that's how I've learned to kind of really get through a lot of this. And some of the other things I've done is along the ideas of self-care. And this idea of, okay, what are things I can do that I can deliberately put into my operating system cycles that are going to maintain my health and prevent and deal with long-term illness. And so just kind of really think of self-care as this kind of proactive and preventative steps that you do at work, whether it's vulnerability research and management, threat hunting, patching files, whatever it is that you're doing to get ahead of issues proactively. And so there's different things that you can do. It really kind of helps regulate your dopamine and serotonin. And these are really the two most popular balanced out neurotransmitters that help regulate mood and well-being. And so serotonin does a variety of things in the body, and it's really unknown exactly why its levels are so tied to mental illness, but they basically say it's that regulation effect, because it really has this balance throughout all functions in your body, particularly mental health, through the way that you digest food. I mean, it's just really a strong regulator. And dopamine is this feel-good transmitter. It's what the brain releases when you eat food, or you eat food that you crave when you have sex. It contributes to feelings of pleasure and satisfaction as part of this reward system. So it's a really important neurochemical, and it boosts mood and motivation. So this idea of how do you kind of balance out your serotonin and dopamine ahead of time before things get unregulated. And there's a lot of things you can do. And some of the things that I encourage people to do is take, out of all these things, some things that work for me and stuff is reduce the alert fatigue. On this phone, I don't have, nobody believes me, but I don't have work email, I don't have Slack. On the weekends, I take off Twitter. It's really hard to get a hold of me digitally. Actually, a couple companies messaged me, you take all this stuff off your phone, how am I supposed to get a hold of you? You don't know how to get a hold of me on my phone. Oh, yeah, you can call me. People forget that you can actually call people. But it was this idea, like, if I email, I'm not being tied to email constantly. It's not healthy. Because I found myself being very reactive. I mean, that's kind of what it is. So I took off a lot of those things that would cause distractions or alerts that would raise this level of anxiety in my body, and managing that. Also, there's other things like, calling a friend, just venting to a friend, making those human connections. And that's been really hard for a lot of people. This is one of the hardest parts of the last 18 months of people doing the self-care management in a really toxic kind of environment, is not being able to call a friend, see a friend. But there's, whatever level of connection you have to make, please do, because that's really one of the most important things in regulating a lot of these things. The other parts are like simple things like exercise, getting out there, walking. You can start small. You don't have to go and do any kind of crazy gym routine. Just getting out there and getting outside the environment and making things. And what I found, particularly in the last year, is commuting home. Now I work at home, so how do I do that? Because I would put everything down in my office, close the door, and I'd walk out, and I'd go for a walk around the neighborhood, and I would come home. And at that point, I'd put everything behind me when I enter the house. I don't even go to the office, I don't touch the computer, but it's this way of just getting away from things. Adding in some exercise allows me to decompress. And it's this little breaks in time management and boundaries that become incredibly important. And what I also found this year is, as much as I like going out and drinking and doing stuff, is I really had to focus on alternatives. Because early on, I think a lot of us probably saw our wine bills go through the roof in COVID, and I was like, okay, this is not sustainable long-term financially or health. I'm not putting on waiting there, and I'm really self-conscious of how I look, so this is not going to be good. So yeah, I found out there was other things to do. Really moderating a lot of that was important. I'm not really going from one extreme to the other, because that's one of the dangers of self-care, is you can really kind of fall into fake self-care of dieting, going from one extreme to another, saying bad things about yourself. I found myself doing that early on, thinking, okay, well, I have to motivate myself by shit-talking myself. And it's a really hard trap for highly motivated people to kind of really beat yourself up and do the things that are not true self-care things. So really try to focus on what is important out of this life, is getting away from the fake self-care. You're not going to miss out things by not being, rushing out. I think the FOMO thing is so important too, because I was like, oh, I have to go, if somebody's doing something, I have to go out and meet them and do this. And really not spending the right time with my daughter or something like that. So it's really easy to displace those efforts in the wrong areas and really not take the self-care steps that you need. And some people say, do you really need it? And you do. There's a lot of myths about self-care that it's selfish or a big ask in your life, and it's not. And quite frankly, you deserve it. Like I said, when you feel better, you treat better, you treat others better, you work better. And some of the stuff you really have to do for some of these self-care steps, like I said, is pick out 3 and do for 21 days. It takes 21 days to develop good habits on average or break them. So do it for a couple weeks. It's not a big ask. Try to go through some of these things and start managing your stress better in your life. But then understand that this needs to be an ongoing practice. Some of the things that I really kind of want to leave you with as we wrap up is that, again, you deserve this. Like, you deserve this life. Don't think that for any moment you're not worth what you are. And ultimately treat others well, because you never know what somebody else is going through. And Robin Williams, unfortunately, who did pass away from suicide, has this great quote, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And that's so true. Just take a moment to be nicer to people. And that's hard for me, because I like telling people when they're wrong. And I think a lot of times they might not know that they need me to tell them that they're wrong. So it's weird that people like unsolicited criticism. But I really had to change that in my behavior dramatically, particularly in the last year, because I realized people have been more on edge, their nerves are burned out, and I just don't know what else is going on in their life. I just need to step back, and that was one lesson I learned in the last year, and we all do. And Warren Buffett framed it the way he's talking. He said one of the best pieces of advice he got from his friend Thomas Murphy. He said, and Thomas said, Warren, you can always tell someone to go to hell tomorrow, which is just an easy way of putting it, right? If they really need to be told off, put it down for a day and come back. And if they really need to, well, then you can tell them off then. But if you don't have to do it in the moment, it's this idea of stop being reactive. And I talked about that in incident response work all the time. It's incident response, not incident reaction. We got to do the same thing with what we do. So just slow your roll. And do like Dalton does in Roadhouse. Just be nice. And ultimately, it's because if you don't make time for your wellness, you will be forced to take time for your wellness. And so by treating yourself right, making sure what you're doing is feel self-validated, feel that you're worth it, you'll feel better. And what I encourage everybody to do is, if you could, tonight, sorry, vibrating. I know I have something on time, I was texting, oh, great over there. No, but to really kind of continue to support each other. And one of the ways you can support yourself is tonight, when you get back to your house, and it's not going to be tonight or maybe Monday or something, take out a written piece of paper, not a telephone or anything else, and just write down 5 good things about yourself when you wake up the next day. So put the piece of paper with the pen there, wake up in the morning, and that's surprisingly hard to do. And people are so self-critical. But if you sit there and say, what are 5 good things about yourself, and try to do that one morning the next week, you'll find how incredibly hard it is, but how incredibly powerful it is for you to be able to think about yourself in better lights, and how it frames things to treat others better. Because you really have to kind of support each other if we're going to continue to have the planet. So really take some time to look into some of these issues. Feel free to reach out to me. If you know others that are struggling, there's a lot of crisis center stuff that I have. I do a lot of work with mental health hackers organization. Definitely check them out. Check out the neurodiversity groups within inside your organization if you're looking to start one. I have a ton of resources on that. We've done really well at Splunk with that. I have people that are willing to reach out and help your organization start that. So with that, have a great day and take care of each other. Impact the planet.